the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain. Today we're speaking with Craig Piggott, who is the Chief Executive and founder at Halter. Craig's highlighted that half of the world's inhabitable landmass is made up of farms. Halter's mission is to make this half of the planet more productive and sustainable. With over 150 people across New Zealand and Australia, and having raised over 150 million in capital across multiple funding rounds, Halter is moving pretty fast, deploying their technology into new farms on a daily basis. So today we're going to hear from Craig and learn a little bit of the Halter journey. Welcome along to the show, Craig.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Look, it's been really interesting actually, watching some of Halter's journey from a distance, and I think I mentioned before the show, Halter is one of the New Zealand sort of success stories that I'll often talk about when I'm speaking, doing a keynote or at an event around the role of technology and futurist thinking, and Halter seems to be a company that has been able to really apply, what I would call a futurist mindset to, the world of agriculture. So, very excited to sit down and chat and sort of, delve into a little bit of the story. But, maybe we can start by hearing a little bit about, how your journey started out.
Yep.
I will say a big thank you to our show partners before we delve into the story. So a big thank you to 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology for their wonderful support of the New Zealand Tech Podcast. But yeah, looking to your journey and where did you grow up and how did your interests come together in terms of farming and technology?
Yes. Great question, really. So born and bred on dairy farms or pasture-based dairy farms. So definitely was safe to say it's kind of in the blood. And my parents are still farming today. And then that was down in the Waikato, and then moved to Auckland to study engineering. So that was I'd say a pretty pivotal part of the journey, really learning like how does technology work and where's it going and what are the trends there, and then found myself as an engineer working at Rocket Lab. At the time it was still well and truly a startup. This was maybe 6-7 years ago now, and that was just an incredible experience, witnessing Peter Beck raise money and build this satellite launch company in New Zealand, which obviously has no history or no heritage of aerospace, or so you could say had no right to do that. And that was very inspiring, and I learned a lot my time at Rocket Lab. And
what would you say if you sort of step back a little bit and look back at that time of the things that you walked away with in terms of learning, because they're obviously you were close to seeing a lot of funds raised, but also of engineering that from an outside perspective must have been incredibly well executed in terms of the outcomes and so on that we've seen with Rocket Lab. But as with any business, and especially a startup, things aren't always as smooth as they look from the outside too, right?
Yeah. What would I? Probably there'd be two learnings. Well, there's hundreds of learnings, but two that you could really point back to as major breakthroughs. But the first one would be that you shouldn't be scared of pursuing a really hard problem. And in many ways, the harder the problem, the easier it is to hire like world-class talent, engineers, design, whatever it is that get excited about solving hard problems. So it's a little bit self-fulfilling in the positive sense. And that really hit home. And then probably secondly was the power of being part of a mission-driven organization. Just a feeling like none other. I'd worked at various engineering places beforehand, and every day when you turned up to work, you truly felt like you were working on something that mattered with a very passionate, inspired, hardworking group of individuals. And I remember thinking, I am just so lucky. That is, many people probably never find a purpose or a mission so fulfilling or worthy. And that was pretty addictive. That was like, okay, for the rest of my life, I want to be part of environments like this. And so leaving to start Halter was a tough decision. But I knew from day one, like, okay, well, kind of it's compulsory that I recreate an environment like that. When you know what great looks like, you're never going to settle for anything less. So,
yeah, that's really, really interesting. And so when it came to your initial ideas for Halter, how long did they sort of take to percolate from from the beginning?
Yeah.
And I think of Peter Beck's story with Rocket Lab. There was a journey there over quite a period of time. What did it look like for you?
Well, we Halter, I went full-time on Halter at the start of 2017. So I guess that's 6 years. And I'd been really working on it for about a year before that. So definitely it's been a journey. It's been, I don't know, 3-5 times harder than you would ever imagine at the start, but it's been also a lot more fun. And there's a lot of excitement there. But yeah, definitely been a journey. When I left Rocket Lab to start, I didn't strictly know what the product would be or what like Halter today looks very different to Halter at day one or day zero. But I knew for sure that the industry had a lot of room to improve, and there's a lot of pressure on agriculture and knowing the world of tech and then knowing the world of ag and seeing the gap between the two. And I thought that was the interesting piece. It's like, okay, well, how do you help to bridge that gap? So many of the breakthroughs in tech could apply to agriculture if only someone was like filling the gap. And so that was really the initial, you could call it a thesis. And we've been building products and releasing things for our customers and farmers kind of ever since, really.
So you saying at that 2017 point you didn't have a product at that point?
No, we definitely didn't have a product. We had a few ideas and prototypes, and actually very quickly so when you as an engineer, you're kind of trained to think in first principles. And so if you boil down the first principles of a pasture-based dairy farm, you sound simple when you say like this, but you very quickly get to cows and grass. And the interaction between the two is like really where the magic happens. And so if you are wanting to help make a farm more efficient or more productive and more sustainable, that's kind of the area you're going to focus in on. And so we obsessed over that. So, okay, well, what would technology look at that part of the farm? There's obviously been a lot of technology on the fringes, on feed additives, all around the edges, but nothing quite right at the heart. And so we went after that. And we spent really the first you could probably say the first 3 or 4 years of Halter was just deep R&D engineering, trying to really understand how we can make a difference and build a product that mattered for farmers. And so very quickly, we started to build a collar or wearable that goes on a cow and understanding animal behavior and working out how we could train cows and monitor them. And so it was always through this lens of how do we help farmers grow and utilize more grass. But that was kind of how the journey evolved. And then as you hire a team, obviously, and add people, then it really starts to go. Yeah.
So at what point did you have to start raising, or did you decide to start raising funds? Because usually there's only there's only so much as a founder that you can, bootstrap unless you've got a whole lot of revenue kind of coming in very, very quickly. And, looking at your business, you've raised, significant, funds now. Yeah. So walk us through how did that begin at the beginning?
Yes. I think a lot of people have quite a tough or difficult decision around, do they bootstrap, do they grow on revenue, do they raise money, all that type of stuff. It was pretty simple for us because I had no money. So it was from the start, we knew we were going to have to raise money. You could have probably gone the moment you have hardware and a multi-year R&D cycle, and you're going after a mission and a market that is just massive, right? It's half the planet. It's very hard to bootstrap your way or grow on revenue to that. And so we almost from probably 3 months after I left Rocket Lab, we'd raised our first capital. It wasn't much. It was a few $100,000, but we were on that track.
And so how did you do it? How did you decide whose door to knock on, or was it family and friends? What was your your approach?
I always laugh about the family and friends around because that implies you've got family and friends that have money to give. But if you do, then great. I think it's
people can borrow against their home, surely.
Wow, yeah. So we raised our first round of capital locally here in New Zealand. It was led by the Ice House. At the time, they were probably one of the few, at least, venture capital firms here. Ice House, Peter Beck, who was my manager or my boss at Rocket Lab, he, at the moment I told him about it, he joined the board and invested, which was a great sign. I thought that was a great kind of reference. So that was helpful. And then K1W1, Steventon was fund, and so it was all local to start with. And then you do quickly realize, okay, if we want to pursue a really ambitious mission and grow fast, and then you start to look offshore, and we jumped to the US and started raising from the US. So how do you do it? I think you just start having conversations, and everything I learned was mostly on the job, and obviously very fortunate to have Peter Beck in the corner helping to mentor and coach, and
So how did he help you from the perspective of on the fundraising side? There must have been some well earned learned lessons from his time raising funds, and certainly he's very vocal. He's been very vocal about talking about the need to go beyond New Zealand shores to raise funds for varying reasons. Some of these things change over time in terms of access to funding.
Yeah, probably the main, if I had one lesson or one thing I look back on and I'm very thankful for, this balance between doing what's right in the short term and the long term. So that's quite a general comment, sorry, but between raising as much money as you can from anybody or turning away capital, or for a long time, we'd turned away far more capital than we'd ever raised. And I think when you're starting out, there's this temptation to just think, wow, my job's if we're trying to raise money, we're raising money, and if we can get a bit extra, then great, we can go a bit faster.
Take every dollar.
Yeah, more or less. And very quickly you realize that like the cheapest thing an investor gives you is their money. And it's all about the relationship and what can they add to the business beyond that, and how they're going to ride the ups and downs in the journey. And so that was something Pete drilled into us from the start. Be very thoughtful about who you raise money from, who you put on the board, how you set up this business, because if you get that wrong in the opening months, you're in for a world of pain for years to come.
Yeah.
It's kind of minimum 10 years, right, as a journey. And often I think Rocket Lab's been going 20 or, a lot longer. So, very important who you get on board.
Yeah.
At the beginning, I was like, I was probably a bit perplexed by the strictness of that, but now I look back and I completely understand where it was coming from.
Yeah. And what other lessons would you maybe share that have sort of stood out on that fundraising journey, whether it be kind of how you put your best foot forward, or do you put your best foot forward and be, completely transparent and so on, right? Because you don't want to put a false picture up there, but you also want investors to have some confidence that you think you're going to be able to deliver something at some point too, right?
For sure. Yeah. Every stage of fundraising is different, right? So in the beginning, if you were trying to raise your first round of capital, it's often a lot of what they care about is going to be, who are you? Some people call this founder market fit.
Yes.
How much do you know about the market? Why are you passionate about it? Like it's kind of a bet on the personnel. Because at that stage, they're like, wow, the product's probably going to change. They barely know what they're even building or selling. So that's like an example of the first round of capital. All the way through to today, for us, it would be, what are the metrics? What's the growth like? Can we talk to however many customers? So you have traction and you have real data, and so it's a lot more. It's like a different process. So I think probably if I had one thing I often see is people treating fundraising like just something which is like they're just a passenger on their fundraising strategy. That is, oh, okay, it's April, well, we need to raise money, rather than it being a very intentional thing they plan around and they work towards, and they like really focus on for a period of time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Good advice. How much pressure has sort of the fundraising process, put you under? I remember from other conversations I've had on and off the podcast where, I've heard about some pretty stressful scenarios for founders who are, get into a position of, well, if we don't raise a little bit more funds, within the next day, week, month, whatever it is, then the future of their operation is in question. And I guess we sort of you stretch that out across kind of all tech startups, and the large majority of them will get to that point at some stage and never come back from it.
The stats aren't great. That's a fact. I think it'd be like turning up to a competitive tennis game and being, really stressed about the outcome. It's like, well, at that point, there's a little bit you can do. Obviously, how you show up, how you prepared for them, all that type of stuff. But you're talking the final 10%. It's fundamentally a product of everything the year leading up to that, or the 2 years leading up to that. So I think, have I found fundraising very stressful? Well, it's high pressure, and that final 10% matters. Like how well you tell the story, how well you can represent your company, and all the hard work that everybody's put in. Like you definitely feel a duty of taking the bat in the final stretch. So I think, yes, there's obviously pressure. But I do think that most of the work's been done far before you hop on the plane and raise the capital. And we focus a lot on that. There's no point if you want to walk into a fundraising carrying a lot of risk. Well, that was your decision. In terms of, you don't always get to choose, but trying to de-risk that stuff months beforehand, and really like performing as a team prior. So we spend a lot of time talking about that as a team, and just not leaving too much up to chance when it comes to raising money.
That sounds like the way to go. Now, for those that don't know too much about Halter, maybe walk us through, what it is that you're doing, what's the technology that you've developed, and what benefits does this bring to your customers? Why are people excited and doing business with you?
Great question. So in the simplest sense, we are a collar in an app. We put a collar on every cow, and the farmer has an app on their phone. That's what you see to start with. Now, what the collar can do, I guess. So the first one is it collects a lot of data. So it's monitoring the animal, their health, their fertility, calving, all this type of stuff. And so a lot of people would say, oh, it's kind of like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch for cow. And you're like, yep, that is the kind of the first part. That's relatively understandable. The second piece is the collar is actually able to train these animals. So cows are already trained on farms to fences and a whole lot of cues. And we're using the same principles, but using cues on the collar and software to do that. And so that enables us to really help increase the efficiency and the precision on these farms in a way where you're really working with what's best for the cows and the farmers. So what that means for a farmer, right now they have paddocks and they can manually put up fences to be precise. But if you should give 90% of a paddock, do you put up a fence and leave behind this little 10% slither? No, that's just the practicality of farming. But 10% is actually quite a lot when you look at the size of these farms and the revenue they're doing, and those bits matter. And so you could say like precision farming or precision grazing is a big part of it. Secondly, because we're able to fence and move these cows around, these are labor saving component. Labor is really tough in agriculture. Not that many people want to go live in the middle of nowhere and wake up at 4:30 in the morning and work 80, 100-hour weeks. And so labor has been tough for a while. And that's a really important part of it. It's just helping to reduce the workload for these farmers. And then because of all the monitoring side, the animal health and well-being piece as well. So it's kind of you could summarize all that as a platform to help farms be more efficient, more sustainable, more productive. And it's evolving. We release new products almost every day. We can update the collars remotely and update the app as well. So more recently, especially in this market, tightening macro and a downturn in milk price and things like that, it's like the focus from almost every farmer is pasture. It's the cheapest form of feed. How do we get more efficient with pasture? How do we grow and harvest more grass? And that's exactly where we started, if you go full circle. And that's what we've been working on.
Oh, exciting. And so, with the collar able to, direct, your cows about and so on, does that basically mean that the fences that we're used to, having around paddocks and so on are no longer going to be needed in the future? Is that kind of the reality, or how good is the technology, versus the sort of older approach, and how do you see that sort of playing out longer term?
Yes, good question, and a very common question. So fences are already there for the most part.
Yeah.
So we're not really out to. Some people ask, oh well, how much? Yeah, fences are expensive to build, and well, we're not really trying to replace a fence. It's actually more about how do you be more precise than a fence or than a paddock. And so, why would you buy a Halter? To grow and harvest more grass through being more precise. So fences are there. Do some farmers pull them out? For sure. Some farmers after a while start to pull them out. They're in the way. They restrict what you can do. And so, but it's not compulsory. If on day one when we turned up, we said, all right, step one is pull all your fences out, every farmer would look at us, like we're crazy. And so, no, the product works around the fences that are there. And we operate with a level of precision, kind of beyond that. But in theory, you wouldn't need them. You could just if you were to do a greenfield farm, you would just have a big long meadow of grass and cows, and you wouldn't need the fences.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that precision. What's the benefit that that brings to a farmer?
So some farmers, we're talking pasture-based dairy farmers here. A lot of dairy farmers would say, I'm not really a dairy farmer. I'm really a grass farmer. The cows, as long as I keep the cows happy and healthy, I don't have much control over like how a cow converts grass to milk. So that's a static variable, really. And obviously animal husbandry and the monitoring and the health piece is really important, but that's a lot of farmers do a good job of that and are world-class at that. So then the question becomes like, all right, well then I buy a lot of land, it's expensive. How do I ensure I'm growing and harvesting as much grass off that land? That's the variable that changes massively farm to farm. maybe to double click, if you took a farm that's growing 13 tons of pasture per hectare, it's like the unit you would track. The difference between 13 and 16 would be double the profitability. And the difference between the bottom 25% and the top 25% is easily that 3 ton. So we see within the same region, even across the road, these differences. And that just comes down to how you manage your grass, and how you actually, today it's very much an art, it's intuition, it's a feel. And we're trying to turn that into far more of a science, giving farmers the data they need to do that and make good decisions.
And so with that data, how much then sort of still comes back on the farmer's expertise, and how much could some random person like me go, all right, I'm going to go and buy a farm. Let's try out Halter's technology. Let's see if I can beat the average farmer. I'm presuming I'm sort of somewhat on a hiding to nothing on that basis.
It would definitely be easier, but we would say you could liken our product to being a cockpit. Imagine right now, if you're a farmer, you are making decisions every hour of the day based on a feel. Really, you've got imperfect information, and you're just forced to make these decisions every day. And so we aren't replacing the decision making. The farmer is still the pilot. We're just the cockpit. So we want to make sure we give them all the information they need to make the trade-offs, to get the balance right, and to ensure they're achieving whatever goals. And there's a few really important reasons why we don't want to run the farm. Like, we don't know what the farmer's goal is. Their goal might be, I want to coach my kids' hockey team. I want to get off farm as soon as possible, and I want to spend more time with my children. The farm next door might be about growing equity, being more profitable. So, who are we to tell them like how to use the product exactly? So we help. We hopefully help them achieve their goals. That's, I guess, us doing our job right. But we don't tell you what to do. And every farmer knows their cows and their land and far better than we would. So
yeah. Now, tell me about building and growing a successful team. That's something you've done well at. You've been winning awards along the way. Most recently at the NZ High Tech Awards, you had the most innovative high tech Agritech solution. Yep. You've got some good stuff that's going on here. How have you done that? Have you found the right sort of people and help them all be focused in the same direction and had the growth that you've had to date?
Yeah, good, big question. Good one though. So I think probably looping back to that point, that one of the lessons from Rocket Lab around, if you have a worthy mission and a set of hard problems, you can attract some world-class talent. So that's definitely true. We have, trying to make an entire industry more productive and sustainable. One that's been historically hard to deploy or technology into. There's no shortage of technical challenges and go-to-market challenges and all that. So I think the right ingredients are there. So that's a good start. And then I think the second most important is that you care about it. You truly believe that hiring the right people and fostering the right culture is important to you. I think a lot of people, you definitely hear people that think, culture's like, don't have time for that, or it's not that important. It's like, well, you don't get to choose. It's there anyway. It's just whether you design it or not. Like, how people interact when you're not around is still there. And so we've, from the beginning, always put a big emphasis on who do we hire, who are the leaders in the business, and what is the culture? Because that's fundamentally what is a company, right? We could change our name, we could change our product, we could change our logo, and we'd still be just what is there, and who are we as a company? It's our team and our culture, and so we've always focused on that. And it's been hard. Hiring is incredibly difficult, especially like if you were to. I would describe our culture as a high performing and relatively intense place to work, to be fully honest. But that attracts ambitious people that want to achieve. It's not for everybody, and we're not trying to make it for everybody. But if you want to have impact on the world and really, get excited about working with world-class people and put in the effort, then yeah, I think it's a great place to. Our team really enjoys that part of it. So yeah, it is. It's just so important. You can't even overstate how important people and culture is.
It sounds like the pace at which you're moving, you need people that are, in 110% on the mission. And maybe that's not just a sort of 9 to 5 thing. So how does that sort of play out in in practice?
Well, yeah, it's definitely not 9 to 5. How does it play out? Well, it looks different for. We still have a lot of diversity of how people. I would say everybody at Halter is a high performer. We talk a lot about high performance, and so if you're in an interview at Halter and you're like, oh, I don't really want to be a high performer. Like, well, okay, this just isn't compatible, is it? Like, it's just high growth tech startup. Like, yeah, there is. That's for us, and that's what we design our culture around. So, but it does look different to different people. So, we have all sorts of. We've got the people that work till midnight every night and work every weekend, and I'd probably put myself somewhat in that camp, and that's. No one's asking us to. It's because we want to. It's because we enjoy what we do. And we're all growing and becoming better people because of it. So, and then there's down the other end of the spectrum, we've got plenty of people with families and kids, and they have hard shoulders to the day, but they're like incredibly focused with their work. They get the result. They somehow make it work. So it doesn't come with, huge sacrifice from a lot of the team. And we really have a lot of respect for that, and that probably comes down to how ambitious we are on the mission. And so yeah, we try, and I think the most important thing is when someone signs a contract, they know what they're signing up for. We're not trying to pretend. It's almost part of the interview process is like the anti-sell. Like, why would you want to leave your cushy corporate job and come work for a startup? Like, it's fast paced, it's long hours, it's just day and night. But for the right person, that's they love it.
I mean, I think it's some elements of that are reasonably common within the startup world, right? There is this need to move very, very, very quickly, and you've had people that have backed you. There will be competitive pressures, and just to achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve, you can't kind of sit back and say, hey, we've got unlimited time to do this, right?
I've thought quite a bit about this because you can find every different example of culture in many successful companies. So there's obviously no right or wrong culture. I think the most important is that it's aligned and shared. You just can't have completely divergent styles within this. You've got to be all on the same page, at least rowing in the same direction.
Yes.
And so I think you just have to be very true to what your culture is. There's a few first principles that are important. Like for us, farming is 24/7. Like if there's an issue and our customers need us on a Sunday, well, then they need us on a Sunday. That's just the industry that we play in. If when I was farming, it didn't matter if it was Christmas Day, you still needed to milk the cows, feed the kids. Like there was work to be done before you got home and pulled the presents out from under the tree. So, it's a lifestyle, and that like we obsess over our customers. That's why we're here, and so of course that flows through.
And so how have you kind of built the team and the team sort of culture? How does everyone sort of gel together whilst working so hard?
Yes. Well, I think that we still are. That's the first thing. Like, we're still really early in the journey to achieving the mission. How? There's a lot to that. It's probably the answer is it's every interaction. It is you. it's not what you get up and say. It's not the slide deck you share. It's how you promote. It's how you hire. It's how you act. It's how what the leaders value, what the leaders do, how you coach and grow people. It's just every interaction. That might not sound convenient. Like you obviously can't fake it if it's just every interaction. But I get asked a lot. Like Halter is probably notorious for being a very high velocity company. We ship a lot of product very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of urgency in the culture, and so I get asked by a lot of other founders, how do you move fast? Like, well, there's not really like 5 steps to move fast, otherwise everybody would do it. It's in every interaction. It's when someone says, okay, cool, I'll get that to you by the end of the week, and you say, oh, can we have it today? Any reason why you couldn't do it today? No, I can probably do it today. Perfect. Well, there's 3 days shaved off. And if that's you can see how the clock speed of the company changes if every interaction is faster. So yeah, it's just consistently. We have a lot of tactical things where I'd say we focus a lot on feedback. We believe in this concept of talent density. So we try and have world-class high performers in every single seat. Context over control. There's a lot of these like beliefs to the culture. Why hire the famous quote, why hire smart people and tell them what to do? Hire smart people and just give them all the context they need to do their job. There's a lot of things we spend a lot of time on.
You mentioned feedback. What does that look like for you?
Well, if you have, I'm a big believer in this concept of a policy. A policy is only good if the primary objective is error reduction. So if you're auditing accounts, 100%. If you are trying to prevent issues, or then put a policy on it, process what it like. But if you're there's no 10 steps to start a startup. Like, how do you create a product that customers love? Well, so, people would say, "Oh, listen to your customers," but it depends, right? It depends on the industry. It depends on a lot. So there's obviously there's no process to that. Otherwise, everybody would do it. And so, you're kind of fooling yourself if you try and solve every business problem with a process or a policy.
Yeah.
A lot of it has to be just get the right people, give them the context they need, and let them run. And so, but you get new people on board. There's no policies or processes in certain areas of the business. And so, well, how do you correct behavior? Well, feedback. So ideally they might, we don't have a policy that tells you what type of hotel to book when you travel. But we would say you should be willing to stand up in front of the company and explain why you chose that hotel. If you're not comfortable doing that, you've probably picked the wrong one. So we have little things like that. But if you're traveling with someone, they would say, hold on, no, that's not how we do things at Halter. And so feedback's in that environment critical. It's not a very Kiwi thing. A lot of Kiwis, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it, which we completely disagree with. Honesty is really important. And you're really doing the recipient a disservice if you can't give them the feedback that they need to grow or be a high performer.
Yeah. So is that something that's very much happening on a continual basis? Does it, how do you actually do that?
Always trying to improve and be better. We're not perfect at it. Say we're better than most because we try. But yes, it is. We're always talking about, we're very intentional about our culture. So we're always talking about it. We have culture decks. We are iterating. It's a living, breathing thing. For sure.
And how do you do reviews with your team members? Because when you're fast growth company that that introduces all sorts of dynamics, when you've got highly capable people, they're often well sought after in different directions as well. So you can't sort of sit them at the same level necessarily for a long period of time. I'm picking. So there's some important factors to get right there.
Yes, I think for Different people are obviously motivated by completely different things. And but for a lot of our team, it would come back to, am I actually maybe I get asked this a little bit in the hiring process. I've been at Halter now for 7 years. Obviously, one hand you assume the founder and CEO is always gonna be there, but people do ask, "Why are you still here?" Which I find a funny question. And I think the true answer is, obviously, I love the mission. I love the product we're building, and I feel like I'm doing the work of my life. But I am also becoming, I think, a better person, like as a human, beyond my role as CEO or as an exec. And so I think that's true for a lot of the team. It's that the purity of trying to do really hard things means if you're sitting at the table with 6 people and you're trying to solve a problem that you've had for a month, say, really difficult engineering problem, and it doesn't matter if there's an intern at the table that's been there one day. If they say, "Oh, we thought about this," you go, "Shit, that is a great suggestion. Like, I'm wrong, you're right. Let's do that." And that's open-mindedness. There's a lot of things that a lot of people would strive for.
Yeah.
And that becomes like a habit and a routine. And then guess what? You're far more open-minded, like in the rest of your life, with how you interact with your friends, your family. And so I think there's just a lot of purity to being in an environment like that. And I'd like to say makes better humans. So yeah, I think that's a long answer to your question, but you put that in the bucket along with opportunity, growth, career progression. Yeah. As the company grows relatively fast, there's no shortage of hats to wear and opportunity. Usually you'll grow at the speed that you can handle yourself.
Yeah. Now, what do you see as sort of the future, potential of Halter?
Yep.
The business has been, well known for the collar that the cattle wear. But you've recently released your Pasture Pro app. There's a lot of possibilities when it comes to sort of leveraging technology. Within the agriculture world.
Yep.
So what's your latest tech, and where do you see things sort of evolving over the years ahead, and even sort of the markets, because your focus at the moment is very much New Zealand and Australia, I take it, but I'm sure there's a potential beyond that as well.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I'll start with the mission. I know you touched on it right at the beginning. Half the world's habitable landmass is agriculture. So how do you help that half to be more productive and more sustainable? That's really answering the question, how do we feed the world as it grows, growing population? How do we increase food production and do that in a manner which is sustainable? And we believe pasture farming is like right at the heart of that. There's 4 times as much carbon in the soil as there is on everything above the soil, and a 0.4% increase in soil carbon would offset the entire world's emissions. So, farmers are a lot of things. They produce food. It's like the number one industry at pulling countries out of poverty. But fundamentally, they're like the custodians of the planet. And so, if you can give farmers the tools to run a more productive, sustainable farm, well, then you're going to see this just huge impact on the world. So that's our motivation. That's why, that's where we're going. And we're very pure about that. If we can come up with a better way to achieve that, a better product, we will build it. We will invest, and we will give it everything we've got to move the ball forward in that direction. The most recent step we took was a product we call Pasture Pro. And that comes back to the fact that pasture is just the single most important thing for the productivity of these farms. And Dairy NZ would say 85% of a farm's profitability is pasture harvest. Different consultants and experts would frame that in different ways, but that's a product 100% designed for this current market where the payout's tight, and these farms have to be efficient. They don't they can't just do what they did last year. Like it is a different market, and there's pressure there. And so these farms kind of have to innovate. They have to change, and that's why we build that product. And so it's trying to give farmers the tools to grow and harvest more grass. So that involves, the outcome sounds relatively simple, and we try and keep it very simple and usable for our farmers. You know, when you're out in the field and it's raining and your hands covered in mud and you're trying to use it, it's got to be good. But the technology under the hood or behind the scenes is like very bleeding edge. The whole stack is based on like a lot of the most recent machine learning, and there's a lot of things that wouldn't have been possible even just a couple of years ago, which is pretty cool. It's cool to see that full spectrum. We hire some of the best machine learning engineers, software engineers, designers from around the world, and then teach them farming and pair them up with the best farmers we can find, and you get some pretty cool thinking.
Yeah, when we were talking before we started, you talked about being able to point your smartphone, take a photo of the grass, the pasture, and for the AI tech that you've built, basically to give you feedback that in the past would have taken a very well established farmer to be able to look at and to give an opinion on. But this is now the sort of technology you can put in the hands of someone that's just started, and the technology will actually give you some pretty strong pointers in the decision making processes.
So it's a great example. So the reason we started Halter in New Zealand is because New Zealand is world leading at pasture farming. It's it's very hard to argue with. They're incredibly efficient. They're incredibly productive. So then if you take the top 1% of the farmers here, you're like really pretty spoiled for knowledge and exposure to the science behind. And a lot of those farmers can, by eye, after a long period of time, start to assess pasture and quality and residuals. But it takes a while to learn. It's very hard to train staff. It's different. Obviously, there's human bias and stuff. So, but all that's enough to help you realize, okay, well, if a good farmer can do it by eye, then we can take, I wonder how many photos it would take for us to do that with a phone. Turns out a lot, but you go and capture tens of thousands of photos of in this case, it's a residual. So how much grass you leave behind, really important, a critical metric to growing and harvesting a lot of grass. And we can that's now a product. So now anybody, you could have never, like literally someone that's never stepped foot on a farm could pull out their phone, take a photo, and it could tell them whether that's good or bad, whether you grazed it too hard, too high, too low. And so you're trying to support the decision making of these farmers so they can have staff do it. Because these top farmers aren't always on farm. They're juggling so many different things, trying to run a business. They're trying to hire and manage staff. There's many parts of farming. They're not always out there in the paddock looking at the grass. That's one element of it. We ingest satellite data. We use machine learning to learn every square meter of their soil. We fuse it with local weather data off the collars to build a picture of how much grass is in every piece of the farm, and do all sorts of analytics and track that over time and help farmers to know how it's tracking over the season and things like that.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting. Sounds like probably a lot more challenges to deal with ahead. But as you get this right, this is a sort of thing that can tilt an economy in a much better direction and have a really big impact. I'm picking sometimes it only makes it's only a sort of small percentage change in one situation, and actually the flow on can be really big from that, can't it?
100%. We I think if you do your job right, then that's exactly what should happen. Especially in New Zealand, agriculture is such a big part of the economy. Even just about an hour before this, we got off a call, and it was a customer that had doubled their their EBIT per hectare, so their profitability, from having Halter versus a control farm. So we're not talking like little increments around the edges. It's a step change. And so then the question is like, okay, well, how quickly can you scale, and can we get this across, a meaningful chunk of the market? And that's where you'll start to see productivity gains through the sector, and which is great for New Zealand. And I think ultimately the world, the ambitions are obviously global. There's no shortage of ambition. It's just trying to get the focus right. And
Fantastic. Well, really exciting to chat with you, Craig, and get some of the inside knowledge on what you've been up to with Halter. Certainly very it's going to be I think a really interesting journey ahead. So we'll look forward to having you back on again in the future as things progress, and as you go out and beat the competitors on the global stage. So thank you very much for your time.
Cool. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on this episode of the New Zealand Tech Podcast, and of course a big thank you to our show partners as well: Gorilla Technology, HP, Spark, 2 Degrees, and 1NZ. And if you've been listening to or watching the live stream, of course, go and find the podcast in your favorite podcast app, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And follow the show there. If you are listening to the audio podcast, which I know is most of you, it is well worth catching some of the live streams as well. So have a look and follow us, whether that's YouTube or Twitter/X, Facebook, or you can follow myself, Paul Spain, on LinkedIn. And those are the channels which we stream live to most Tuesday afternoons. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much, Craig.
Cool. Thank you.
All right.
Pleasure.
All the best.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.